In one of my previous videos, I had a throwaway question. It was a video talking about the new Avengers, and I was doing a breakdown of the Shang-Chi movie and the demographics of the people who went to see it. And in that video, I just wondered out loud if the Blue Beetle movie would be successful, if the targeted audience would turn out to make this movie successful. Now, I don't know if I said it on the video, but personally, I doubted that was going to happen. And here we go. After the first week, the box office for Blue Beetle is weak. And this is an article from the numbers. Again, I like the numbers because of all the comparison charts and breakdowns that you can do. And I'm going to show that later. But according to the numbers, the weekend projections, Blue Beetle and Strays, which also came out, post weak opening numbers, which is exactly what I felt was going to happen. And if you even come down in the article and you actually see the studio weekend projections, and they predicted that Blue Beetle would only do 31 million. Now, the movie itself only cost $120 million, so it's a cheap movie to make, which means that it should have been even far easier for it to make a profit. But even then, they only predicted $31 million, which is weak. Because with these superhero movies, we know that that first weekend is key, because after that, that second weekend, you normally see anywhere from a 30 to even 60% drop in the box office. So they only predicted 30, which means this was going to go down quick anyway. But what they actually got, the projected, is $25,400,000. So it only made 81% of the already low predicted box office. Second article, the weekend predictions, Blue Beetle headed to the top on opening weekend, but looking underwhelming. And in the original article, it just goes in to say that this 25 million is the second worst opening for a movie in the DC Extended Universe. Now, James Gunn came out from the start. He learned his lesson, but he came out from the start and said that this movie, Blue Beetle, is the beginning of the new DC universe. So it shouldn't have that same stigma of what happens in this movie doesn't matter. But even with that, it's the second worst. Just squeaked ahead of Wonder Woman 1984, which wasn't a good movie, but was also released in theaters and on the streaming services in Christmas and in the middle of the pandemic. With all of that going, that movie performed slightly less than Blue Beetle. So again, it's the second worst opening. And when you look at this, you just have to ask the question, well, why is this happening? Again, I'm comparing it to Marvel, particularly Shang-Chi and Wakanda Forever. But again, it's a superhero movie. And so you have to ask the question, well, why is this happening? And I think the reason that it's happening is, unlike Wakanda Forever, which was targeted, we know, at basically Black, primarily African American. And for the first movie, we put it over the top. It made over $700 million. The second movie didn't do as well. But even with the controversy between those who wanted to recast T'Challa, not necessarily in that movie, but at least hold out the hope, don't kill off the character, and those who didn't care and said, get over it, even with that back and forth going within the Black community, that second movie still was profitable. It made $853 million. It made over $400 million domestically. And even Shang-Chi, which didn't do as well, if you look at a comparison chart, in its first weekend, Shang-Chi still managed to make $75 million. And its budget was only $30 million more. It was $150 million budget, and Blue Beetle is 120. Again, I know I'm comparing DC to Marvel, but again, you're still talking about superhero movies. And so Shang-Chi, which didn't do as well as Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, still it had a much stronger showing than the Blue Beetle. And so it just goes to that question that these targeted movies, in the case with the Blue Beetle, they went heavy with the marketing. They had a lot of promotions for Blue Beetle, and the biggest talking point was that now we have our superhero, we have our representation. That was the biggest point that they were pushing with this movie. But as we see, the target audience did not show out for it. Just like with Shang-Chi, the target audience did not show out with it. When it comes to targeting these movies, whether it's DC or Marvel, when you're targeting a movie at a particular demographic, the only one that consistently has made these movies profitable has been the Black community. And that's the point that I want to make. Even with the split and the fans of Black Panther, we still came out and the movie made $853 million, and it gave Marvel a profit. Not as much as the first one, but it gave it a profit. Shang-Chi, You can go back and forth. It's debatable. But when you look at the $150 million budget and then you throw in the advertising budget, they're lucky if they just broke even. Blue Beetle was only $120 million. Not sure what the marketing was on that. But even if it was as low as $50 million, they really need to make $200 million. Actually, $400 million to break even, because half of the box office number, the amount that makes it the box office, goes to the distributors and the movie chains and stuff like that. So that's why people typically say, just go ahead and take half of the box office away. So Blue Beetle, to make back its money, or just to break even, would have to make probably $300 million just to break even. And it doesn't look like it's going to do that. Not with an opening. Now, the opening worldwide was 43 million, but domestically it was 25. And we know, again, if it's true to what has always happened, unless this thing has amazing legs, and that's possible, but unless it has amazing legs, it's going to have a sharp drop off that second weekend, and it's not going to do as well. When you do these types of targeted movies, you're targeted to a group that is not monolithic. You're talking about a group of people that span multiple countries, cultures, dialects, national outlooks. Even though individuals are here in the U.S., whether they're immigrated or they're naturalized or they've been here for several generations, there's still that connection to their home country. And so you're dealing with people that aren't monolithic. And so these movies, and in this case, the family identify themselves as Mexicans. So it's like, well, okay, well, if you're from a different Latin American country, how does your country or people from your country feel about Mexicans? And I think that's something that these studios aren't really paying attention to. And the same thing with Shang-Chi. Before it came out, you saw the back and forth over whether the casting and whether these people were good representation. And there was a lot of back and forth that you normally don't see, because a lot of times these groups in America, they present themselves as a solid front, particularly when it comes to issues and they're dealing with the Black community. They tend to be a united front, but once you get behind the curtain, you peek behind the curtain, you see that no, it's not a united front, because you have people from different countries that have different feelings from people from other countries, despite any kind of similarity of language or geographical location. And so when it comes to that, I think that's why, and it was really clear with Shang-Chi, that's why the Asian community did not turn out the same way the African-American community turned out to send that movie over the top. And so that's why I asked that question, would the same thing happen with Blue Beetle? And apparently the answer is yes. The target demographic is not turning out to make this movie successful. So when you look at the raw data and when you look at the money that's coming in, the only sure group that has 2 times out turned out to make sure that a movie targeted them was successful, that has been the Black community. And that leads to my big question is, like, if Marvel is looking at this, and you know they have to, particularly with the state that Disney's in and Marvel's in and all the cutting and the reconsidering, if you're going to cut back on Disney Plus shows, if you're going to cut back on movies, when you look at something like this, you need to put out Blade. Okay? Because it isn't just the Black community. Everybody wants to see that movie because of the special place that the original Blade movie holds. It's the thing that saved superhero movies. So everybody wants to see it, not just the Black community. That's a surefire thing, but yet Marvel is dragging its feet on putting that movie out. And you just have to ask the question, why? Particularly if you're in a financial strait, that movie should have already wrapped up shooting. And there's a lot of things that goes into that, but it really should come out. And as far as the DCU, I think they should learn the same lesson too. Maybe you should have put out a Cyborg movie instead of kicking Ray Fisher out and then taking any kind of reference to Cyborg out of the Flash, which was probably good anyway. Maybe you should find an authentic Black DC character and do a movie for them. Because again, when it comes down to pure financials, even when we're beefing with ourselves, we turn out, because for us, it's more of a united front. When we're looking at these movies and we're seeing that representation, it means something to us. Even if we're fighting among ourselves, we recognize that it means something to us, much more than it seems other targeted demographics. And here's a very provocative question. If Ms. Marvel was not done as a Disney Plus show, if it was put into the theaters, how well would it have done? My honest belief is that we would have seen a similar thing with Shang-Chi. it probably would have made $300-400 million, but there wouldn't have been that big push from that targeted community either. Because when you look at the numbers for the Disney Plus itself, for the show, they weren't that great. They weren't as bad as others, but they weren't that great. So once again, it just shows that when it comes to these targeted demographics, the only ones that really show up and put money in Marvel's pocket, and some people might think that's bad, some people might think it's good, but just from a purely financial situation, you can always bet on a movie that's targeted to the African American community. If it's done well, that's the other thing. And I'm talking about superhero movies. There have been other movies that have tanked for obvious reasons. But I just wanted to come and talk about that because, again, I asked that question. I wondered about it when I did the other video. And now that the numbers are out, it's clearly showing that Blue Beetle had a weak opening. And it's only going to get worse from there unless something miraculous happens and it grows a pair of legs and it doesn't have that steep drop off that normally comes in the second week.